morning, everyone who are here
Good
today.
morning.
Good morning, the friends from the Facebook who are online with us, watching the lecture during this special weekend, right? Very special to all of us when we celebrate family, right? Family ties. And we'd like to say welcome for the ones who are coming for the first time. And we would like to start with a page from the book Happy Life, psychographed by Divaldo Pereira Franco from Joana de Angelis. The page tells us the message. Think in terms of eternal life. Death is nothing more than a moving van. When the physical tissues wear out or are violently torn, they free the eternal spirit, which returns to its spiritual home. Everything is transformed. The body changes and decomposes, revitalizing other expressions of the material. The spiritual being, which inhabits it temporarily, leaves it to assume its structural reality. Live, therefore, in the knowledge that death may overtake you at any moment. You must begin to prepare now for the inevitable journey. So, thank you, God, our Father, Jesus, our Master, for this opportunity, for this moment, for this morning where we can study your teachings to help us through our pathway on earth. Bless all the spirits who are here with us, all the incarnated and disincarnated, who is gonna be studying with us. So now I'm gonna call Otto, who is gonna do the lecture for us today about discarnation.
Thank you all for being here with us today. I see so many new faces, and it's great for us to see that because it is a special weekend, as Anna said, right? We're talking about here in Canada about the family the long weekend for the family day, and it is basically our second home for those who are here all the time, right? So we can feel like we're all brothers and sisters. So I really would like to have you like all the time with us. Most of our volunteers and others are probably somewhere else, but we do want you guys to see, and then you can see the rest of our family. So today I'm going to talk about discarnation, which is kind of funny topic for most of us, especially on a family day long weekend. But I wanted to bring to you something that would be meaningful, not only just the basics. So when I looked at the theme, so just so you know, so we have our group that we basically prepare for the lectures, and the theme was discarnation. But I was free to choose whatever title that I would like to use. So the title that I chose was Different Perspectives to Shape Your Future. There is a reason for that, and I'm going to tell you. But before even getting to this name, I honestly had to search for an image that I could start from, right? And I chose this image because it's the dawn of the sunset, right? So it's basically the sunset of this life of like a corporate human being, right? But I was really having a hard time in getting this specific image. And I'm going to tell you why, based on my path through getting this presentation put together for you. So let me ask you who are here, like especially because you're some of you are new. What does discarnation mean to you? Can anybody? Does anybody want to say anything about it?
Leave the flesh.
Leave the flesh. Yes, that's a very good explanation about it. Anybody else want to say anything about what do you think it is or what it is, discarnation? I can tell what Google Images tell me, right? So when I search Google Images give me like a blockbuster movie, Ghostbusters. So I do understand it kind of relates to the topic of the day, but it's not exactly the exact type of information that I wanted to bring to you. So I continued, and the second thing that I found is that there's someone who called himself a discarnation specialist, and there's a video about it. And it's funny because I did find it really interesting for me to bring here, not because it's something related to the topic, but because in English the word means like a spinal disease. So it's basically a spinal disease or disorder that causes low back pain. So it is completely off topic, but it was just another point of in this journey for me to be here and present to you. So the first thing that comes out of the Google Images search is this. It's a coughing, it's a death, it's a very negative information that the people relate to discarnation. And I was honestly disappointed because it's not the way we should look at it. So I really dove into the books, and this is real. Like this is me researching for this presentation, and I wanted to bring this to you because some people may not know how much effort is put into this type of presentation. I read not all those books. Oh, I read all those books, but not all at once. I researched each one of them for specific passages that I could bring you the most important pieces for me to show you what exactly that means as it relates to the title of this presentation, which is Different Perspectives to Shape Your Future. So what discarnation, according to Spiritist, is. So according to Emmanuel, from the book The Consoler, the most precise way, precise way to explain what, precise way to explain what discarnation is to move as somebody moves from one city to another in the physical realm, affecting neither the illness nor the virtues, with a simple modification of these exterior aspects. So this is the way Emmanuel explains. Emmanuel, who is already in the spiritual world, someone who passed through so many incarnations, and we all went through this. We are all specialists, not the way the previous image was telling us about, but we are all specialists in one way or another. But in this life, we don't have a lot of details of what we went through. Emmanuel does. Right? So Emmanuel knows his incarnation history, so he knows what discarnation means, and this is the way he explains. But there is another explanation here about being a simple change of state, which is similar to the other one, but the destruction of a fragile form that does not provide life and life as an organic function with the necessary conditions for its functioning and evolution. And this is from Leon Denis from the book O Problema do Ser, o Destino da Dor, which is not translated to English yet, as far as I know. But it would be the problem of the being, the destiny, and the pain. And this is also another very, very conceptual explanation of what discarnation means. And when I say conceptual, it's because when I think about discarnation, I think it may probably relate to you as well. We're not talking about a very, very solid concept. We're talking about pain. We're talking about people who left us, people who may be in the hospital today, and you think it may go through to another life. So to me, it is much more than just the death, right? That specific fact. So, but before I was even able to come up with this, I did do something to try to get a sense of what others would like to know. So I asked some friends and family and some of the other volunteers, what do they want to know about discarnation? Because to me, it means something, and to me, it means grieving about someone who left, and grieving about someone who may live in the future, because you may have a son, and then you don't want to even think about the possibility of that beautiful human being leaving us, right? So there are so many things that come to mind, but it's my opinion. So what about others? And I want to ask again, like, what is that you would like to know about discarnation, if you guys want to know? And those of you on the internet, if you want to bring your question, what do you want to know? We may be able to answer those questions at the end. So, any of you, what would you like to know about discarnation? Do you have any question?
When you pray, when it's your name.
So one question back there is, do I feel pain when I discarnate? Another one. Just another one.
Where do I go?
Where do I go? Yeah, so that's another. So those are very common themes for when I was asking my friends and family and other volunteers. So when I asked, I know it is because we're here. I don't want to, and I caught you guys on the spot, but it really poured questions on me. So I asked on WhatsApp and Facebook and others, and a lot of questions came to me, and I was really okay. This is much more intense and much more than just the concept that I brought to you on the previous slide. So I tried to come up with a way when I went through those questions to kind of organize those ideas to bring you what I could in 45 to 50 minutes. And what I did there was I separated between the questions between, and it's also color coded, but between the before discarnation happening, during discarnation happening, and the after discarnation happening. And I don't know if you can see the trend, but there's a lot of people who are asking about what happens after. So what happens to my family member who left us? What happens to me when I die? Where do we go? Do we suffer pain? Like all those things happen either during or after discarnation. There's very little here on the first set of questions. I see like 4 questions, and those are grouped, honestly. So because I received so many questions, I had to group and kind of reward some of those. And this is what I could come up with in one slide. But even then, when I was trying to prepare for this presentation, I was like, okay, if I try to explain each one of those questions, what those questions, what the answer would be, it would be like a long presentation to you, and it could be not that meaningful. So I wanted to bring you something else, and that's when I came up with this idea of discarnation perspectives. So the way I was thinking about it was basically a timeline, right? So before, during, and after discarnation. And I was basically getting it wrong. Not completely wrong, but wrong. So it is more like a 3-dimensional type of thing. And I divided into 3 perspectives for the same timeline. So it could be many more perspectives. Those are the perspectives that I could come up with based on the questions that I received. The first perspective is the subject, the discarnating spirit. The second one is those who stay, like us, for example. And the third one is the spiritual realm. So the questions were all around those topics, around those perspectives, right? And in those timelines. But then what I did was, if I had to use a sort of a heat map where those questions would lie, this is where those would lie. So it's basically during and after discarnation on those 2 quadrants there. So either the discarnating spirit or those who stay. So when I saw this, it came to mind that we are basically getting this completely wrong. So we are asking too many questions about what happens after and what happens to us when others who we know are leaving us and so on. And then I came up with this idea of shaping your future. And that's the theme of the day. But I would really not feel great if I did not answer some of those questions. So I decided to bring some of those answers to you. so that we can also get into the topic of the day. So the first question that I brought to you is, can we foresee when we or people close to us are going to discarnate? So this was a very common question. So it is one of the questions in the first quadrant, the first set of questions there, but it came very often in my sort of survey. So the answer to this is very straightforward from the Spirit's book, from Allan Kardec. Can the future be revealed to humans? And the answer is, in principle, the future is hidden from them, and only in rare and exceptional cases does God permit it to be revealed. So, wouldn't it be somewhat selfish for us to think that God would reveal to me when someone who I love is going to depart this physical life? So, God could reveal like when certain cure to certain diseases are going to be developed, or when a tsunami is going to hit a country. Like there are so many other things that are more important than someone. Why would this be revealed? So it's in that situation. To me, it makes sense that this is not really something rare and exceptional. So it's very unlikely that this is going to be revealed. But it is possible. It is possible. Some people may know when they are going to discarnate or when someone is going to discarnate. But again, it's very unlikely. And then the other question that helped me in terms of asking this question is, for what purpose is the future hidden from them? So if they knew the future, they would neglect the present, and they would not act with the same freedom, because they would be dominated by the thought that if a certain thing must happen, it's to no use being concerned about it. Otherwise, they would try to prevent it. So people would try to prevent it. So it's like those time machine type of movies or TV shows. So they would try to prevent it, or they would neglect the present. So if I'm going to die tomorrow, why would I do something today, right? Or would I do something good for someone, for my neighbor, if that is something so bad happening to me? So I'll basically just do whatever I can in this life so that I can be happy, right? So that's probably the most the thing that will come to mind. And one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is I selected this specific portion in red and underlined there because I want to use this in the end of this presentation. So keep in mind some of those sentences or words, because I'm going to bring this back to us whenever we get to the end of this presentation. And the last portion of this answer is coming from again from the consoler, from the manual, and it says, with the exception of the suicide, all discarnation cases are determined previously by spiritual forces that guide human activities on earth. And this reminds us that we are in control of our life. And you may say, what? What are you talking about? Because you just said it is a plan that is guided by someone. But it is actually the opposite. So when we come to Earth as an incarnate being, we planned our discarnation as part of our incarnatory planning while it's still in the spiritual world. We may not remember it, but it's our decision that is coming to fruition when we discarnate. So it is very important for us to remember there is a plan, and we're going to do according to plan, but there is always a possibility of us to choosing the other path, and we can choose better or worse. So we can do better, and then we can get a better more time incarnated, or we can have a decision to shorten our life, and that's going to be a much worse situation. We are talking about it later today. So this is one of the answers that I wanted to bring to you that will be important for us at the end of this presentation. So the other set of questions, and I forgot to mention about it. So I mentioned this at the top here, perspectives of those who stayed. So you see that in the beginning, actually let me go back here. So perspective of those who stay. So this is the second slide for this perspective of those who stay. And I grouped those 4 questions here because they kind of belong the same around the same specific topic, which is what can we do, or actually, um, yeah, what can we do about like others who left us, and what happens to us? How can we help others who may be going through difficulties here and may depart soon? So those are very common questions that came to us. Some of them as during transition, like the first one, can we help loved ones during this transition? And the other ones are, what can we do after they discard? So can we do something about it? And the answers come again from the Spirit's book as a very important source of information. I always want to go back to basics, again to repeat some of the words from our brother Marcus Duplay, who may be watching us. And the question is, upon leaving the body, is the soul immediately conscious of itself? And I'm giving this to you because it may not relate this exactly like this, but the answer is somewhat helpful in order for us to understand what we can do. So the answer is immediately is not the right word. It remains in a state of confusion for some time. And the second question is, how does the inconsolable sorrow of those who remain on earth affect the spirits who are its object? And the answer is, a spirit is sensitive to the memory and grief of those who it has loved. But persistent and unreasonable sorrow affect it grievously because it sees it in such excess a lack of faith in the future and trust in God, and consequently an obstacle to progress and perhaps their reunion in the spirit world. So we don't have the straight answer, but we can see that this is the exact opposite that we should do. So when we grieve too much about someone who departed, and when we are inconsolable as there is a here unreasonable and persistent sorrow, when we are going through this process, we are actually preventing that detachment from the physical body, and we are keeping them close to us, while we should actually do the opposite. So, what would be the opposite for this specific set of answers here? Like, what should we do to prevent to do the opposite of what we are saying here, like the persistent and unreasonable sorrow? Would anyone know what to do?
Sing love and prayers.
Perfect, love and prayers. So I brought to you a very short reading from the Gospel according to Spiritism, and I wanted to read to you because I think it is very important. At the end of the Gospel, there's always this section of prayers, which is exactly what Rafael brought to us. And I wanted to bring the introduction for the prayers for those who are no longer on earth. So prayers for spirits who have just left the earth, do not have only the purpose of providing them with a testimony of sympathy, but they also have the effect of helping their soul's disengagement, therefore shortening the state of confusion, back again, that always follows the separation, and rendering the awakening more peaceful, awakening on the spiritual realm. Moreover, as in any other circumstance, the prayer's effectiveness lies in the sincerity of the thought and not in the abundance of words spoken more or less pompously, and in which the heart frequently takes no part. So we're this is important for us to remember. So when we are talking about the discarnation of someone, praying is always the best option. So we have to wish that this person who left us is in a better state, or if it is not, that the spiritual angels, like whoever you want to call that your mentor, that they are helping those who discarnated in order for them to evolve. That's the whole purpose of our presence here on earth, right? So we're evolving as spirits. So it is something that I wanted to bring to you as part of this perspective, and as part of the transition between incarnated and discarnated. So the other set of questions from the last section of the perspective of those who stay is how to understand what is happening to a loved one who discarnate, and can spirits communicate soon after they discarnate? So this is a very common set of questions as well. So people are very curious about what happens in the mediumistic meetings. What happens during the in the spirit center? Is there something that really we can we evoke spirits? Like, there are so many questions like this. That's more of curiosity, and I wanted to bring some of the answers to those questions. And for that, what I used was the Medium's book, one of the basic set of books from Allan Kardec. And the answer is, let me just read from here because it's going to be hard to read from there. So the answer to partially to those questions is, we may evoke all spirits no matter to which degree of the scale they belong, good ones and evil ones, those who recently departed life, or those who lived in the most distant past, illustrious persons, or those are the most obscure, our relatives, friends, and those who are not related to us. This, however, does not imply that they will always want to answer our appeal, or that they even can, regardless of their own desire or request, sorry, which may be refused by our higher power. They can prevent it by reasons that we cannot always understand. So it is somewhat straightforward. Sometimes we don't understand. We don't want to understand that. We want to hear. We want to talk to someone, but it's very hard for us to get a message being transmitted from someone who we loved in one of those mediumistic meetings. We may not even. So in some cases it is possible, but again, it's hard for us to believe that God is going to allow a very, very specific question from you, unless God wants this because it is important for the greater good. So I wanted to bring this to you, but again, it's not the 100% of the cases is not the same, but it's what Kardec brings to us as a general rule of thumb. And then I get to the perspective of the spiritual realm here. So I changed from one perspective to the other. And those are the only questions that I have. So you can see here that we are basically focusing quite little on the spiritual point of view. We're spending more time on the incarnate, or the person who is going from is discarnating, or the persons who are here like us. So the questions that I had was, what happens when we get there? And I think I heard a question from here, right? And is there a spiritual support during discarnation? And if so, do we go through training to discarnate? And I asked the person who asked me what that means, and the training is for us while incarnate to discarnate well. So to go through this transition in a faster way or easier way. So I went again to the Spirit's book, and it's not a straight answer for the first one, but I think it's good for us to remind what happens with the soul after death. So it becomes a spirit again, it returns to the spirit world, which it had left for a time. So that's what happens. So what happens when we get there? There are so many different possibilities, and I can give you so many different examples, and I'm going to go over one of them in this slide. That I would like to give it all to you, but it would be really hard for me to go over all of them. But I wanted to highlight this. Right? It's also every time that you see something in red and underlined, remember that we're going to go over that back again in the end. So the other part of this section, question is, how does the soul preserve its individuality if it no longer has a material body? And the answer is, it has the fluid proper to it, which draws from its planet and to which it retains the appearance of its last incarnation, the first spirit. So when we discarnate, we become a spirit again, but we still maintain our form, unless you're like Emmanuel, and then you can take like other form. But it's another discussion. So this is the way I tried to explain what happens when we get there. It's hard to give you all the possibilities. Those who are participating in mediumistic meetings, we kind of know what may happen, and I'm going to try to bring you one example of what may happen using one of the Andrea Luiz books from the series Life in Spirit World. And I'm going to read because I think it would be too much to write down in the slide. So this is a passage from one of the chapters in which Silveira, which is who is the father but is already discarnated of someone who is going through some medical difficulties. So Fabio, who is on bed, he's basically going to discarnate, and Silveira is there trying to help, and then Andrea Luiz with Geronimo is coming to their rescue basically. So the one thing that I wanted to bring this part of the message because it's part of the answer to another slide. So pay attention. So Andrea Luiz and Geronimo, Andrea Luiz actually asked, "Will Fabio discarnate as scheduled?" Yes, Geronimo remarked kindly. We have our instructions. Our friend will discarnate at the right time. So remember that planning that we discussed a few slides before. So that's part of the plan. So it's the person who here, Fabio, is going to discarnate according to plan. A few pages later, it says, Fabio, deeply exhausted, was having difficulty breathing and was displaying an indefinable uneasiness. His wife was watching him closely. And then a few paragraphs later, it says, amongst us, however, the first steps being taken to provide were being taken to provide immediate help. The patient's father addressed Geronimo, father who was already discarnated, and one of the spirits. I know that Fabio's liberation will require a great deal of effort. However, I would like to help him with the last home worship, in which he will physically participate at his family's side. So his family are all beside the bed, basically the kids and the wife were grieving, right? They were trying to help him and relieve his pain and everything and trying to recover him somehow, right? They were always positive about being able to recover from that situation, but the father, who was already a spirit, knew that the time was coming, right? And then it continues. As a general rule, a dying person's last words are more affectionately recorded in the memory of those who remain behind. For that reason, I would really like to help him say a few words of advice and encouragement to his wife. By all means, agreed the assistant. We will also work with you to do it. It's best that the family be alone. Absolutely, the father said appreciatively. And then Andrea Luiz says, I saw that Geronimo and Aristeo begun applying lengthwise passes over the patient, passes while already discarnated. And I noticed that they were leaving the harmful substances on the surface of the skin, taking great care not to remove them completely. When they had finished, I asked them what led them to take such a measure. He's extremely weak, almost at his end, my guide informed me, and we must do our best to help him without adding to his exhaustion. The substances retained on the skin will be absorbed by the magnetized bath water, that which will be used in a few minutes. And there's a long discussion during this moment, but we can see that there's a lot of support from the spiritual realm. So Andrea Luiz was there, like a group of spirits who were Andrea Luiz was basically going with a group of spirits who were helping this family, and the father of that person who was dying or discarnating was also there, supporting this whole process of discarnation. So that's what an important message about is there spiritual support during discarnation. Another thing to mention about this specific passage is the end. So it mentions a magnetized bath water. So the wife, before the end of this passage here, took the father who was going to discarnate to a bathtub, and that bath water was magnetized by the spiritual friends so that he could relieve some of his pain, help him in order to give that specific message that he wanted to deliver as part of his final words. So you see how much importance there is and how much spiritual support there is in this specific moment of departure. So yes, there is a lot of spiritual support during discarnation. Now the second part to this question is, do we go through some training to discarnate? Well, unfortunately, I could not find any specific passage from any book, but can you think that this may be part of the training as well? Like what we're doing right now, we're kind of learning about what spiritism is, what discarnation is. Like all of those things that we're going through right now helps us in order for us to discarnate better, if that's even a thing. So going to the perspective of the discarnating spirit, and this is, I try to really give only 3 slides. This is the first of 3. But there were so many other questions that I wanted to cover, but in some cases those are more of curiosity type of thing. So I was asked to, is near-death experience a real thing? So although there is an answer to that, I would like not to cover because there is so much that I can provide during this presentation, and we have only like 20 minutes to the end. So the first question in this perspective is, do we suffer or have pain during the discarnation moment? And I heard in here someone asking exactly this question, right? And the second one is it fast or gradual? So it is really a very common theme, and I asked this on purpose because I knew some of those questions would be repeated in this group. So the first answer, as always, comes from the Spirit's book from Allan Kardec. Is the separation of the soul from the body a painful process? And it's kind of interesting because it says no. Frequently the body suffers more during life than at the moment of death. And then Kardec says, in natural deaths, humans depart from life without even realizing it. Now, can you think that it's not going to be painful if you drive your car 150 kilometers per hour against the wall? Of course it's going to be painful, but the discarnation, because of the hit against the wall, but it's not going to be painful, the discarnation itself. You may, because of the action that you took against your own body, suffer after, but the discarnation itself is not painful. So just to give you this little bit of information. And then whether it's fast or gradual, it's funny because all the questions are written in the Spirit's book. So the answer to this, does the separation occur instantly and through an abrupt transition? Is there a well-defined dividing line between life and death? Is no. The soul liberates itself gradually. This way, the spirit disengages itself little by little from its bonds. They unravel. They do not break. And then Kardec adds, it occurs gradually and may vary in speed according to the individual. And I highlighted this one as well. For some, happens in a few hours. For others, lasting for days, weeks, and even months. So according to your, or like whoever is discarnating evolution, how evolved they are, it may take more or less time as part of the discarnation process. So the other piece of set of questions that I received during my survey is related to. Sorry, let me just organize myself here. Is, will you know when you discarnate? Or do we leave our body, before we discarnate? And the other one is, in violent situations, do we leave the body before we actually discarnate? So this is the second set of questions, and I tried to group them so that I could have only like the enough time to present this for you. And I think they are all kind of related to each other. And again, the Spirit's book on question 164 says, do all spirits experience the confusion that follows the separation of the soul and the body to the same degree and for the same amount of time? And then the answer, no, it depends on how evolved they are. So I'm bringing this to you because when we are there, depending on how evolved we are and whether or not we know what we are learning here and whether or not you're doing charitable things to others and what, like all these things that good spirits should do or good Christians should do. If you did that as part of your corporeal life, it will be easier for you to know when it is discarnated, when you are on the other side of on the spiritual realm. So that's the message that I wanted to. So remember from the previous, like some of the previous slides about the state of confusion that we are when we discarnate. So it depends on how evolved we are to know faster or slower what happens when we are discarnate, if we are not alive in our organic body anymore. And then the other question is, can the final separation between soul and body occur before the complete cessation of organic life? And I think it's part of those two questions here, right? So the answer is, sometimes in the death throes, the soul has already left the body, which has nothing left in it except the organic life. So in some cases, if you drive against the wall, you may your soul may leave your body before the, the discarnation itself. And the last one is inviolate or accidental death, where when the organs are not yet debilitated by age or disease. Does the separation of the soul and the cessation of life occur simultaneously? It says usually so. And in any case, however, the instant that separates them is very short. So before the fact that you were violent, that some violent situation happened to you, and the discarnation, these two times are very short. And again, just going back here, I highlighted it depends on how evolved they are. The last set of questions is all about after. The green color here highlights the after we discarnate, and it's similar to one of the questions that I heard, where do we go to, and I brought it back again to this set of questions because I have another answer to this, where we go to depending on the perspective. What happens when we get there, and how to find ourselves well post the discarnation. And this is placed at the end of the presentation for a reason. I'm going to tell you about it. So from the book André Luiz, I brought a very short passage. You probably saw the movie, you may have read the book, and if not, I really encourage you to do so, because it's one of the most important books in my life as a Spiritist. So I really became more of a Spiritist after this. So the message is, let me just read from here because it's easier. And I'm bringing this part because the questions are probably related to Umbra. So a lot of people who are Spiritists or who may have some sort of experience in the field or whatever, we'll probably be relating the discarnation to umbral. So I'm going to read and then we're going to discuss. So umbral works as a region for the removal of full mental residues. Foul mental residues. It is a type of purgatorial zone where one slowly burns away the unhealthy fuel of illusions acquired through the misuse of an opportunity for learning while alive. So I wanted to bring this specific portion of No Solar because of the types of questions that I was getting here. Like, where do we go? What happens when we get there? With the idea of people are going through this purgatory afterlife, right? After the incarnate life. So we have to remember that the No Solar was written in Portuguese, and this is, something that I brought from one of the articles that I read from someone who came to Toronto once to do a lecture. No Solar was written in Portuguese, and in Portuguese, umbral means transitory place, somewhere you basically do this, right? So you burn away your unhealthy view of illusions. So there's a specific meaning to the word umbral. So umbral is not a place; it's a state in which you are when you discarnate. So it's not exactly whenever we die, we all go to umbral. No, we go to a place where we are going to do exactly this. It slowly burn all the illusions acquired through our corporeal life. And again, remember those answers answers from the previous slide. So depending on how evolved we are, we're going to be in this situation more or less time. So the other piece of information that I wanted to bring is from Heaven and Hell, and this is this book, and it's from Allan Kardec as well. And it says the spirit's situation in the spirit world is none other than what it had prepared for itself during its corporeal life. So you see, like all the books are basically saying like very, very, very similar to this last sentence here. Whatever we do is how well we are going to find ourselves during discarnation. So it's what we do now, what is going to shape our future. And that's the reason why I used the the title of the presentation as Shape Your Future. And I wanted to bring back to those perspectives that we're honestly taking it wrong because we are always thinking about here, but we should be thinking about this. So we should be thinking about the before. We should be doing now what good spirits should do, right? So we should be praying more. We should be doing more charity. We should be helping each other. We should be doing so much more. And that's why I wanted to bring back those sentences, and you may not be able to read, but I'm going to read it for you. Do not neglect, and this is my way of trying to bring all those answers in one conclusion here. Do not neglect the present and use your time wisely. All choices made in this life, as incarnated, will shape your future in the spiritual world. If you want to avoid being in a long state of confusion when you discarnate, it will depend on you and what you may have done during your corporeal life. So focus on your spiritual, moral evolution and avoid attachment to the material things. Be charitable, live your life as a good spiritist. And the more evolved you are, the more attuned with good spirits. So do not misuse the divine opportunity for learning while alive. Remember, life is not going to end here. So what we are going through right now is just a very, very short passage of the eternity, right? So we are going through this as a very, very short time. So we are all immortal beings, and we will all return to the spirit world which we left for some time. We are all part of a great family, incarnates and discarnates, so love one another, help each other. Today will be the day that you may need help. Tomorrow you may be able to give help. Today may be the day that you're able to give help, and someday you may need help. So do good all the time. That's what we need to do right now, and always have faith in the future and trust in God, for He never abandoned us. And again, I wanted to close this, and this is probably the end of another presentation. That is, this message is attributed to Chico Xavier, in some cases to Dalai Lama and others. But I wanted to bring that to you because it doesn't matter who it came from. It's very important. Though nobody can go back and make a new beginning, anyone can start over and make a new ending. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming, especially the ones who came for the first time. And that's it. See you next time. All right? Anything else?
If you have
Oh,
questions.
oh yeah. Someone has any questions?
She asked, since the beginning of when you asked us to us to give some questions, does fear affect your passage?
So the question is, does fear affect the passage? So it does and it doesn't. So the fear of death will help us in terms of learning more, in terms of finding more information about what's going on. It's similar to what we're doing right now. So it is important for us to have fear. So fear is part of our life. But like similar to what I mentioned in the beginning about having tremendous grief about someone who passes, the more you fear, the more difficult it will be during the transition. So we have to, as I said in the end here, like have faith in the future and trust in God. So having fear may indicate that you don't have faith in the future, and you may not trust that God is going to help us in this transition, and this is part of our eternal life. More questions from the internet?
I have a question.
Okay.
So first, great job, great presentation. Your effort can see the quality of everything that you spoke to, you present to us. I might have not posed that intentionally, but my question is, does the job of a mentor or guide, spiritual guide, ends when you disincarnate?
Oh, okay. So the question is, does the help from our mentors, our spiritual, like our guardian angels, like whatever we call it, ends when we die, when we discarnate? So the answer to this is no. So it depends. I would say it depends. But remember Emmanuel and Chico Xavier. So they're basically together for many existences, right? Many incarnations, and they are all mentors and they are guardian angels for something like this. So I would say it doesn't end when we die.
Would say it depends on the type of mission that your or spiritual guide has.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Everyone knows about the incarnation process.
Oh, if any, so the question is, does everybody know about the discarnation? So I guess it depends. So it depends on where you, what type of religious knowledge you may have, depending on what type of culture you came from, depending on your family. You may not know exactly what discarnation is. You may just think that there's heaven and hell. You may just think that you're never going to come back. You may think that this is just it. So there are some who are called materialists who may think that this is all we have. This is our material body that's going to last for 80 years or so, and they may just think that that's it. So once I die, that's what happens. So what we have to remember is that there's no. It would be really hard to think like that. So we would live our life like fast lane all the time, so we would just leave, like doing all sorts of things that would please us. So it's not the way it is. Is that what you wanted to know?
Yeah, but does they know after the incarnation what's happened?
Oh yeah, so it depends, I guess, on how they went through the. So let me repeat the question. So do they know after they discarnate if they have had discarnate? So let's say I'm incarnated today. I crashed my car and then I am in the spiritual world. Will I know that I discarnated? So it depends. The state of confusion that we go through after discarnation will happen to everyone. But if you're Jesus, if you're Emmanuel, if you're Chico Xavier, if you're someone who has a high level of evolution, this state of confusion will last a little less. And for others who may be attached to material things, that may last for months, as I mentioned in some of the presentation. So it depends on how long it on how evolved you are to know when, but you will eventually know. So and part of the answer may help you as well. So during the mediumistic, and this kind of things that I was curious about before participating in mediumistic meetings. Um, so when we participate in those sessions, and we hear suffering spirits, in many cases, they don't know that they have departed, so they died. In some cases, they know, but they are not really willing to do much to evolve. In some cases, they happen to know during the meeting that they discarnated, only if we are allowed to give that sort of message to the spirit. I don't know if that helps, but it's something that I was curious when I joined the Spiritist movement. So I wanted to bring that to you as well. Any other question?
One question. You on your presentation you put that the discarnation process varies within each individual, can take days, weeks, sometimes months, and I just remember there are some people who in life express the desire of having their body burned, and accordingly the family will attend to that desire. But how does that influence the discarnation process if you found something in your
So
research?
it's hard to answer, but like some of the lectures that we had in the past year, this question was asked, and this the discarnation itself takes time, right? So it's gradual, like the disengagement from the body, of the soul from the body takes some time. So when the bodies are burned after they die, there is a chance that the attachment is still there. So it may not have been completed in full. So there is like I don't remember where I read, but I remember reading that it's better if that's the wish of the person who was incarnated to wait at least I don't know how many hours. So it's better to wait a little bit so that the process can be completed. But don't quote me on that. I don't remember where I read this.
It's like for 7 days.
7 days or 72 hours.
Yeah, it's 7 something.
So I remember reading about it, and it's probably coming from Feb or some other sources like this.
I got the same information as well, but it's like I didn't know a time. What came to me is they suggest do not burn.
Yeah.
It's just bury instead of burn.
So and again, like this is part of my curiosity before participating more in the Spiritist Center. Some of the suffering spirits who come here to talk to us, they still think that they are attached to their bodies, so they think they are alive. So imagine if you burn that body, so it may be a terrible situation, a terrible moment for that
It's an
spirit.
additional
Pain.
suffer.
Additional pain to the spirit. So I would say avoid, but in other, if that's the wish of the person, then at least wait for a little bit. Any other question?
I have the paper. No, it's the end.
Just close because then we
Okay,
have
okay.
space.
Okay. It's my first time. Thank you for your patience. And there is always room for improvement. But thank you very much for all of you who are here today, especially the ones who are watching us YouTube and Facebook too. So God bless us in our way home. Thank you.
So we're now going to do the passes. So for sort of